Well, when you're working with colors, you're often using the paintbrush, and there's other tools that relate to that. But the paintbrush is really the bread and butter of all of those different combined tools and all the different presets you can use with the paintbrush. So we're going to explore by just actually drawing and creating some different effects using the painting tools. Let's begin by creating a new canvas. And we'll just start with the default Photoshop size here. And we can use it to create a summer scene. And we're going to, first of all, just fill this with color. And I could use a paintbrush to do that, but I'm just going to do a quick option with Edit Fill. Pick a color, maybe a nice sky color. OK. All right. Make a new layer, and we'll use this one for creating our sun. Now to create the sun, we want to have a large brush. And again, I can use my brackets to make the brushes a different size. And you have either the left bracket or the right bracket. And the right bracket's going to make it larger. If I come over here to the top, I can actually see on my brush settings that I can build that size out. You can now go all the way to 5,000 pixels if you wanted to. So maybe 500 would be good. And you can also determine if this is going to be a hard brush or a soft brush, right? Different sizes of brushes. And a soft brush, which is 0, is going to act like a feather. And a hard brush, all the way out to 100, is going to have a very sharp, defined edge. There's also different types of brushes. So this controls the look and feel of those brushes as you're drawing. So I've got one in here. That might be even just a little too big, so I'm going to use my bracket to pull that down a little bit. And then I want to pick out 2 colors I'm going to use for my sun. I'm actually going to use an orange and a yellow. So I'm going to start with the yellow, and that creates a foreground color for me. And then for the orange, I'm going to actually hold down my Control key and just click on this orange color. And by maybe this gun, by holding down the Control key, instead of changing the foreground color, I'm changing the background color. And I can use my X to switch back and forth between them. Okay, so I'm going to start by making sure I'm on my layer, and I'm going to paint yellow. I'm going to move the bracket down a little bit, switch the colors, paint orange, click on my left bracket to resize the brush, switch the colors with the X, paint yellow, and so on until I just kind of get a layered effect of these colors. And I could keep going for a while there. I'll use my Move tool because it's on a separate layer. I can move this in and kind of position it in the space I want. And I'm noticing that I might want to do a little bit of cleanup. For example, that's kind of an intense yellow, and there's a little bit of fade. So I'm going to use my eraser tool here. I want to make sure I have a very soft eraser, maybe a bit larger size, and maybe even larger than that. And I can use that eraser to just erase. And because it's very soft, it's doing a very gradual erase. And I'll use my mixer brush. And the mixer brush is going to work on the paint that I already have, plus whatever paint is in my foreground. And since I was kind of using that yellow and orange a lot, this orange is going to mix with the pixels right here. I'm just going to kind of blend it together, and it softens those pixels so it's not quite as dramatic of that circle shape. I'm going to go back to my regular brush tool. Okay, so now I have the sun element. I'm going to go and choose a new layer, and we'll start with the tree. The trees are always the hardest for me, but there's some great types of brush options that we can use for working with trees that create sort of a bark effect. So I'm going to start with this one here, the 32, and I'm going to use a dark brown. And because I'm on a new layer, I'm just going to paint right here in the middle. And it's creating an interesting kind of a rough effect, make kind of a rough branch here. Okay. And then I'm going to switch to a slightly lighter color, not too much lighter, and let's just change it to, how about this brush? Like that one, I can see that it's very splotchy. It's going to add some texture. Maybe if I go in here and just zoom in, Control Space, and scroll down, little space bar there. And as I paint in, it's adding some of that. And I'm just click and holding. I could also just click, 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 and add texture. And I can create that shape. And I can continue doing this with different shapes. And working on what I want to create, kind of that different effect in there. Maybe that's a little big. That's okay because I can undo and I can also just resize. Even though I'm using some default sizing in there, I can resize it back down until I create something that I kind of like. And I can always use my eraser, maybe resize a little bit to remove some of those painting elements. And I'm not too concerned because I'm going to cover this up with leaves and when all is said and done. But I have kind of a neat effect in there to work on it. And I could even go in and come back to a dark brown color here and just add some extra items. Here's something where just kind of, whoops, I have my eraser. Got to make sure I'm on the paintbrush there. The eraser was going to remove stuff. Here we go. And I could just kind of add some kind of a bark texture element. And then I get my move tool and position it where I want it to be. Okay, let's go ahead and create another layer, and we'll start with the grass. Now, the grass is actually pretty easy to do because we get our move tool. There are two different tools that work with grass. There's a 1 and then there's a 3. So let's start with this one for the 3, and I'm going to pick some colors that make me think of grass colors here. And I'm just going to resize the brush to something that'll fit. Looks like I already got up to about 2,000. There we go. That's pretty big. And then I'm just, oh, this is bigger than I thought. Didn't realize. I think I might have the caps lock on. Let's go ahead and try that on. And let's change this back down to something a little bit more manageable here. The caps lock, the reason I was wondering about that is with the caps lock, you can't always see the size of your brush. When I turn the caps lock on, all I see is the actual point. If I turn it back off, I can see the size of the brush. Anyway, I'm going to start painting now. And what's happening is there's actually some shifting in the color. It's shifting back and forth between different colors and even a little bit of direction. Let's switch to the other brush. It has some similar effects. And I can start painting. And there's some shifting in the color and the direction. And let's take a closer look at these brush presets. I'm going to go here to my window menu and open up brush presets. And it gives me both the brushes and then the presets in here. And so we were using a preset, kind of gives me a sample of what's going on. Makes it even easier to see some of those bark colors as you're trying to figure out blindly what do these create. And then if I go over here to my brush tool, I can actually make some changes as well. So as I have a particular brush selected, like this one, I can see that it has some features turned on. For example, it has a feature called color dynamics. And the color dynamics is meaning that it's switching between the colors that I have turned on and off. And I can even make some other changes to this that would control how it switches between colors. It also has some things with shape dynamics. So this is controlling some things like the jitter of how it's bending and the fact that it's tilting and changing. If I change that angle jitter, you can see how it's making all nice and even, but here it's becoming more randomized. And the roundness is also affecting it, so it's giving it a little bit of a tilt. And that's creating that more natural effect. Also, the scatter is controlling how close the items are together. And you can go in and actually customize and create your own brushes by using some of these different settings. You can even go into things like what edges, and by just clicking on it, you're turning it on. But then when you simply click on the setting itself, then you're able to get to those features. So the noise actually is just a turn on. These are just turning them on and off. I go to brush pose, I can click on it and I can even not just turn it on and off, but I actually have features I can use to work with it. The brush pose is actually a new feature that you can use in CS6. And we start making some slides. We can see what's going on. I've got to turn on the X so I can see some of those effects. I'll go ahead and uncheck that brush pose. And so the idea here is with all these different brushes, they have some presets, And each of these presets come with their own different settings in there that you can also customize. You can even go into these brush presets, you can click on it, and you can choose from different libraries. So there's some assorted brushes. We'll go ahead and click on OK. Adds those brushes in, or we want to make some more exciting, we can do special effect brushes. And they add some other elements in, like the famous ducks, and there's my favorite, the butterflies. And I'm going to go back to reset brushes, and this goes back to our defaults. And when we reset the brushes, another brush that we had was a leaf. In fact, there was a couple different leaf options in here. I'm going to use this one that looks like kind of like a maple leaf. I'm going to make a new layer. Go ahead and move that down and create some colors that I want to use for my leaves, and just start painting. Maybe add a little brown in there too. And you can see there's some color dynamics that are involved, and some that shape dynamics, and some of those jittering. My tree doesn't look too bad anymore now that I've gone ahead and covered it up. And I can also use my move tool and kind of move those items, because they're all on their own layer. It makes it a lot easier for positioning it as I see fit. All right, let's make ourselves another layer in here, and I'm going to try to get myself just a clean old brush, and I'll reset all the tools. I'm going to go ahead and reset the colors back to black and white, and maybe make this a smaller brush, real small, and this is where I could do a bird. Maybe even make it even smaller than that. And those are kind of big, but if I free transform, Control T, I could resize them and rotate it and position it and create some effect in there. And then, of course, I love those butterflies. Let's go ahead and add some butterflies in. It's a special effect brush. We click on Append. It's going to add the butterflies too. And we'll make sure we get ourselves a brand new layer. You get the butterfly brush. And the butterfly brush, it's all about the color that we use. Let's go ahead and click on pink. I'm going to go and click on a yellow. And let's just see what we get. All kinds of bright colors, because it's actually has more than just a color dynamics. Let's take a closer look at these color dynamics. It has some other features with the hue jitter. So it's really changing some of those colors quite a bit. So that's some effects. Now, not only can you load different brushes and different presets to create your different effects, but remember there's a community out there of Photoshop users who have different things to share. And so as you create some of your elements, you can save them and you can share them with other people. So for example, I could come over here, and there's a website called Photoshop Exchange. And this website is Photoshop Exchange allows me to find stuff. And if I did a search for trees, which is one of my weaknesses of trying to draw those, I could do a search here. And I could even narrow it down to just say brushes. Then I could find some trees, and some of them are going to be free and some of them are going to be for a price, but usually it's pretty inexpensive. But here's an example. I could download these trees and install them. And once I did that, I would be able to load them just like I could load any of my standard brushes. In fact, those are some trees that look familiar. I think I might have downloaded them at an earlier time. You can also create your own type of brush. And so if you were to create a shape that you wanted to build, so I'm going to do a real simple basic selection of this. Oops, make sure I'm on the right layer here. Make a real simple selection of the wheelbarrow. I'm not going to put too much effort into this because I'm just more interested in the shape of the wheelbarrow than the actual details of it. But there you go. There's my basic shape. And from there, I can go into Edit, Define Brush Preset. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And you can see that it's pulling it in. It's always going to be a grayscaled version of it. That's okay. And I'll call this wheelbarrow for short. Click on OK. Let's make ourselves a new layer and maybe get a bright red color. Make sure I have the right tool. I've got my brush tool. And there's the wheelbarrow that I just created. It's pretty big because of the resolution it's in. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that down to something a little bit more reasonable. This is where having those brackets is really handy. And instead of dragging, I'm just going to do a real simple click. And it creates that wheelbarrow effect. Now there's some transparency involved because when I built it, it wasn't black and white. So if I actually had painted this all black first, edit fill, fill with black, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a brush. Okay, there we go. You can see the difference. One of them has that grayscale effect, and one of them is actually a hard stencil. Let's go ahead and pull that down a little bit. And we'll just go ahead and hide this, create that brush. And then I could even turn this into a saved file. This is just another way of getting to that place where I could save it. I could even upload it to Adobe Exchange and share with other people as well. So what you have are some great ways of enhancing your digital photographs or even creating your own elements. And in the hands of an artist, you can even make very photorealistic drawings as well. Or, like me, someone who just likes to play a little bit with the Photoshop tools, exploring ways to customize your own imagination.